Okay.
Cool, cool. All right, well,
All
just
right.
for like a little intro, this is going to be another round of the fourth Arthuria mock debate tournament. We have Delilah here, we have Deonteleologist here. For this round, Delilah is taking the position that doing blackface should be considered a hate crime. Deonteleologist is taking the opposition. They'll have 40 minutes to debate. You guys can get started.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Uh, First, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I'd like to also thank Dentons for inviting me. I never debate on this, but I've always been impressed with Deontologist's admirable performance. That's from you, man. All right. It's been nearly 200 years since white performers first started painting their faces black to mock enslaved Africans in minstrel shows across the United States. Blackface commonly refers to when someone, typically in white skin, paints their face darker to resemble a colored person. It was racist, and many people find it deeply offensive. But before I begin this debate, I like to frame our understanding on what hate crime means. And I'd like to point out one important definition. The term hate can be misleading. When used in a hate crime law, the word hate does not mean rage, anger, or general dislike. In this context, hate means bias against people or social groups with specific characteristics that are defined by the law. Most state hate crime laws include crimes committed on the basis of race, color, and religion. Many also include crimes committed on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability, or any other perceived difference. It doesn't always include physical violence. Someone using offensive language towards you or harassing you because of who you are and who they think you are in their social construction is also a crime. The same goes for someone posting abusive or offensive messages about you online. And now for the term crime. The word crime in hate crime is often a violent crime such as assault, murder, arson, vandalism, or threats to commit such crimes. It may also cover conspiring or asking another person to commit such crimes, even if the crime was never even carried out. And I'd like to give you a little bit of context in the culture of blackface, and that blackface is much more than just dark makeup used to enhance a costume. It's much more of a performance. It's a malicious cycle that ignites various types of conflicts between social groups, preferably white Americans and African Americans. It occurs to me that there's a social hierarchy between white Americans and African American immigrants who were enslaved and used for labor and unfortunately for entertainment. A motivating factor to this is that it's the history of Black people and that the market demands in the entertainment industry during that time. Miserably, the demand was very high among white Americans. They are highly in favor in seeing a white man on stage up next to an actual black man while mocking the entire race like a big slap against their face for simply painting their face black. For example, in vaudeville, vaudeville shows and on Broadways. Yes, black actors sometimes wore blackface too because white audiences didn't want to see them on the stage without it. It's a matter of market demands. There are also blackface performance to thank for some of the cartoonish, dehumanizing prompts that are still managed to make their way into the American culture. And we and with these media circulating during that time, it's teaching those children of those generation and even in this generation to be a part of this dehumanizing culture that is now passed on until today. Nowadays, it's also becoming less easier to implement Black history and Black culture into white American culture to reverse the ongoing effects of hate crime. From my research, San Diego Union Tribune reported on August 6th of year 2020 that two men face hate crime charges after assaulting at the Black Lives Matter protest. The man who was punched, Marcus Boyd, was recording protests on June 7th in Imperial Beach, where he was ambushed from behind an attack caught on camera by a bystander and posted on YouTube. After he was hit, Boyd turned and fell. Prosecutors said that he hit his head on the ground. The attack on Boyd happened during a protest against a racial injustice and police brutality sparked by the death of George Floyd, a 46-year-old man that was unharmed in Minneapolis who died after a white police officer kneeled on the man's neck for just under 9 minutes. Just because the color of the skin differs from each other, I don't think it means that we can simply construct a hierarchy that would be inherited and passed on to this generation. I do believe no one can ever be born equal, but just to dehumanize someone simply by the color of their skin is disrespectful, mainly on the victimized social group. It also doesn't do any better to improve the moral judgment of the kids in this generation either. Although I strongly agree that if the entertainment industry hasn't rooted its profit from the history of Black people, then this type of event would have never even happened anyway. And that leads to why I'm defending that doing blackface should be considered a hate crime.
All right. Is that everything for your first statement?
Hmm.
All right. So, I mean, very impressive um, display of historical knowledge here, and I'm not going to dispute any of the history. I 100% agree that the history of, especially the United States, although this minstrelsy and blackface has occurred throughout Europe as well, and probably all throughout the world at this point.
Hmm.
Certainly, America has a long history of white supremacy. It's a long, disgusting history. And the more you learn about the history of blackface and minstrelsy in the entertainment industry in the United States, the more you realize just how deep it goes and how saturated our entertainment culture is. I mean, Mickey Mouse himself started off as a character of minstrelsy when Walt Disney created him. It was something I learned on a podcast a couple months ago. So yes, absolutely, blackface is a horrifically racist, horribly immoral practice. Um, but I don't think that it should be criminalized for the same reasons that I don't think that many other deeply offensive, deeply immoral practices should not be criminalized. So I'm going to start off with the FBI's definition of a hate
Hmm.
crime.
Hmm.
So that states that is a hate crime is a traditional offense, criminal offense like murder, arson, vandalism, or any other, whether against a person or property, that is motivated in whole or in part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. And presumably, there are other categories that if the bias was sufficiently strong that it could include those as well. So I have three main objections to including to including blackface as a hate crime, given this definition.
Hmm.
I also do think that this is a good definition of hate crime. If you want to take issue with that, we can go into that as well later. So first
Okay.
of all, uh, blackface doesn't fit this original definition because uh, blackface is not a traditional offense, right? It's not a criminal offense, and so it can't fit the definition of a hate crime because the definition says it's a traditional offense, criminal offense, that is motivated in part or in whole by an offender's bias. But painting your face in any particular way is not itself a criminal offense. So, first, blackface doesn't fit the definition of hate crime here. So, we would have to change the definition of hate crime, uh, either because blackface is not already a criminal offense, or also because although blackface is by and large an extremely racist practice done for racist reasons, there is a lot of blackface that is not motivated by anti-black bias. for instance, young children who don't know any better, who don't know the history of blackface, dressing up as a certain character or as a certain celebrity that they uh, want to dress up as for Halloween or for any other purposes. Even people who should know better, but do so for other reasons. For instance, because they're doing an impression and they think that the comic effect will be greater if they do blackface, right? And say that they actually harbor no bias. This is sort of a tangent, but it's just one of the difficulties of hate crimes is actually proving that there is bias in part or in whole that is motivating a certain offense. But again, the original problem is that painting your face in a certain way is not itself an offense, and most people would say is protected by freedom of speech or freedom of expression. So that gets into the second point. The second objection is that making blackface a criminal offense would establish a very dangerous legal precedent, giving the government power to determine and to significantly constrain freedom of speech or freedom of expression. So, if blackface were to be determined a hate crime and painting your face a certain way um, with certain determinations, we could add certain qualifications such as acknowledgement of the racist history of minstrelsy that would perhaps prevent, say, making like whiteface illegal. If you want to focus on historical oppression, then it seems that still you're going to have a lot of other avenues opening up, such as, would it now become offensive for men to to dress up like women? Um, there is actually a long history of this. For a long time, women weren't allowed to be actresses in entertainment and plays and such, and so men would dress up uh, as female characters. And so this could lead to criminalization of that. And also, I mean, if you give the government power to actually start restricting freedom of speech, then they it's very hard to determine how far exactly this can go, because legal precedent is a very slippery slope, and usually the slippery slope arguments are deemed fallacies. But here, I'm not trying to use it as a fallacy. I'm trying to point out that uh, that this is the sort of thing that I'm not trying to use it as a fallacy. What I'm trying to say is that uh, setting such a precedent would open up the possibility for such fallacies to even get started on the government's behalf. On the judicial, the the Supreme Court, and so on. And then this could bleed over from freedom of expression into freedom of speech, and things get kind of scary. I think freedom of speech is really a founding principle of all truly free societies. And once you limit speech, you're going to uh, regret it pretty quickly. And then the last objection I have is that even if we could somehow evade all of the problems with the previous two, I think our society as it is right now, given the sort of social awareness of racial issues that we've gotten to, although it's taken us quite a long time to get here, is that our society is already punishing blackface pretty well. There's no need to add a legal sanction to um, to sort of discouraging blackface when our social sanction is already working very well. I mean, people are very embarrassed uh, if their blackface photos are leaked. Many people have lost their jobs for, even very old blackface pictures being leaked. Megyn Kelly lost her job for even questioning whether blackface was immoral. She hadn't participated in any blackface, but even just questioning what was wrong with blackface was enough to get her fired from her job. So
Mm.
so the last point is that even if we were somehow able to avoid all of the pitfalls associated with making blackface a hate crime, it's not clear to me that there's even a need to push this any further. So those are the three main objections I have.
Okay. Yeah, I completely like emphasize with your point right there. I do agree that yeah, it might not be considered as hate and you might not even need to be charged for like simply saying I wore this blackface to, you know, put hate on someone. I do agree that it will spark conflict between like white people too, but if I could make a humble suggestion is that there are also ways where we could legislate a law to protect the ethical balance of the cultural representation in the entertainment industry so that it promotes and educate the people of this generation as well as children to you know enhance their moral judgment in making friends and like harmonizing the community as in a way that the entertainment industry could just like market a much more ethical image for both social groups rather than one social group and disregarding the other. Yeah.
So I'm
Oh
not
my god.
clear what exactly you're suggesting here.
I'm
Does
suggesting
this
that
involve making it a hate crime?
not specifically involving like how um I'm saying that rather than just, you know, having like a hate crime and putting charges on hate crime. I'm saying that maybe we could promote a culture of that for both sides instead of like on one side so that it does not ignite a conflict on one social group against another. But it's just simply that even if
No, go
I
ahead,
do
sorry.
agree that it will take years to like adapt to that new culture, but it's just like, you know, the fact that hate crimes are starting to become more physical and sometimes sexual in many disturbing ways. Like if let's say if a white man commits a crime on a black woman simply because she is black and he believes that yeah, I don't like you because the color of your skin, until then he might, you know, put his emotions much more in his rational judgment in terms that if he starts hating her, he might do more stuff to her in terms of that if he already killed her, he might as well do something more further disturbing things to the corpse. And it's just like it doesn't feel humane in a way that yeah, it's like the hate crime the modality I'm saying that the modality of the hate crime is just like increasing from like being biased to physical and sexual and when I say like it's becoming more physical, it kind of can be constitute into like the realm of that in federal law that if you start, you know, putting your actions against someone, then you might as well be charged for that simply because you already act on upon that situation.
Yeah, I don't think I disagreed with anything you said right there, but I'm not clear how that relates to making blackface a hate crime.
Hmm. Okay.
Like I 100% agree that we should be promoting a culture where this sort of thing doesn't happen, and that all violent and violent physical and sexual hate crimes should be hate crimes, right? Um, and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. But I'm still not sure what you're trying to get across with respect to blackface as a hate crime.
Mm.
Here might be a useful place to start, right? So we had my definition of a hate crime as supplied by the FBI, right? A traditional offense, criminal offense, whether against a person or property, motivated in part or in whole by an offender's bias against one of those identity groups. In this case, right, it would be race. So, do you take objection to that?
Mm-hmm.
So, you would propose a different definition then of hate crime?
I think I could, but I like to stick to the same definition I said before.
Okay, sorry. I if you did you have a different one from that?
Nope.
Okay, so we're on the same page about what a hate crime is by definition.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So then the question then would have to be, right, then we would have to make blackface a traditional offense, and then it would count as a hate crime when it was determined that someone's putting on blackface was in part or in whole motivated by their bias against black people. Is that right?
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So can you tell me about like what the offense would be? Would it be any sort of uh painting one's face to look like a certain race, or would it just be would we just restrict it to blackface?
Mm. Damn. I'm not sure how to rebut on that.
Okay. So, I mean, so maybe it'll be easier if instead of going like bit by bit, you would just sort of like walk me through how you would implement a statute that says, okay, we passed this legislation. Now we are criminalizing blackface.
Okay. I mean, this might sound vague, but in the first phase of like implementing like this law could be from first like um starting like a petition in where like people would favor in that, and those like that kind of signify how that there is an actual group of people that are interested in like these type of like things.
Is this just like a democratic process to ratify the criminal statute? Is that what you're talking about? Just like make sure that that there's some popular support behind it?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. And then, but like, what would the statute say? Like, what would it criminalize exactly? And like, would it just criminalize painting your face a certain color? Would it criminalize just blackface? How much black on your face does there need to be for it to qualify as blackface? Can black people be guilty of putting on blackface, or is it only white people? Can mixed race people, Asian people?
I think like I think this can apply to like all type of races. Like if an Asian person is in favor of like blackface, then that could also like be charged with, because like they're promoting that culture. And when one person promotes one type of idea to another, it's like kind of like creating that dangerous like motion against like the entire population. Like of course like the I of course one person might not act physically on it, but then when that comes to like influencing like everyone, not everyone's gonna have like the same like opinion on how to like you know, go into that problem. Some might act physically, and then it would lead to violence. And to what your point saying that uh about like how much blackface, like how much black paint are you gonna put on your face? I think that could be like um hmm, I mean, it's hard to say like the amount of paint you put on your face, but if it's like too, I would say like if it's too much, it could like, you know, justify as saying like, oh, you're putting like blackface on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so we'd need a certain threshold for it to count, right? Just putting two black dots on your face. We wouldn't want to say that's blackface, or um, dressing up like a football player and putting those lines under your eyes or something, right? That we wouldn't want to say that's blackface. And presumably, wearing like a charcoal facial mask, like a skin, what do they call those things? Like an exfoliating mask or something, like a mud mask, but charcoal and black. That wouldn't count as blackface, would it?
No, I think depends on like the context that they're trying to pull off. Like if
Okay.
you're putting black dots on your face as a form of art or drawing black lines on your face as a form of art, that to some people would see it as like art. But then we will have to like question the intentions after like, oh, if they did this type of form of art, is it like um, you know, offending anyone?
Is the standard going to be whether it offends people?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that seems to open up a bit of a can of worms because anyone could be offended by anything, really. Um, if you go outside wearing like a purple T-shirt, and I think that nobody should wear purple because purple should be reserved for the queen, right? I'm offended, but presumably that doesn't mean that we should prosecute you for wearing the color purple, right? So, and in the same way, somebody who goes outside and wears a Led Zeppelin T-shirt, I'm offended at their T-shirt because I think Led Zeppelin is a phony band who have stolen a bunch of their songs from underground musicians, and so that really offends me to see somebody wearing that. But that doesn't mean that we should, right, prosecute this person. So I mean, presumably anyone could be offended by anything in principle. So we're gonna have to carve out a more narrow category.
Okay. I mean, I don't have anything else to say.
Um, okay. I'm not sure how this debate format works. Are we supposed to go the entire time, or like if we Stone or whoever, if we reach this kind of point, do we just do like closing statements?
Yeah, you absolutely don't have to wait until the end of the time capacity. If you want to just end it now, you can give closing statements and we'll put it to a vote.
Would you like to do that, Delilah? We do closing statements.
I mean, you can do it first too.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
sure, I'll go.
hmm
So, just to reiterate what my position has been, is that blackface is a horribly disgusting, immoral, unjust, racist, white supremacist practice. But it should not be criminalized. It should not be regarded as a hate crime. I use the FBI's definition of a hate crime, which is a criminal offense, uh, whether against a person or a property, motivated in part or in whole by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. I showed that blackface does not fit that definition, either because blackface is not already a criminal offense, and also because there's a lot of blackface that is not motivated by anti-black bias, such as young children using blackface um, to perform certain costumes or characters. My second objection was that making blackface a criminal offense would establish a dangerous precedent, giving the government a lot of power to significantly constrain freedom of expression. This could lead to further uh, constraints on freedom of expression um, in the bodily sense and clothing sense, and then even eventually to the government policing our speech and yada yada yada, authoritarian state 1984. We don't want to live like that. And my last objection was that even if we could get around all these problems, our society already does punish blackface effectively. There's no need for a legal sanction when our social sanction works perfectly well. People are already embarrassed when photos or other documentation of them wearing blackface uh, surfaces, and people have already lost their jobs for this. People have even lost their jobs just for questioning it. So I don't think that we really have any reason to make blackface a hate crime.
Mm, okay. Okay. So for my closing statement, I like to say that um, doing blackface should be considered as a hate crime, considering how how physical the situation can be. That's it.
Great. Thank you both for debating, and thank you to the audience for tuning in. I'll post the voting poll in debate chat. As always, just base your vote off who you think performed better overall in the debate, and I'll also move everyone to Sirius Saloon.